along with my counterpart, Mary Lowe, who's she's the founder of Families Engaged. So she and I have been traveling Texas. We have spoken with a bunch of True Texas Project groups in Webster and let's see, I think we just had one in Lubbock. We've been all over the place. And it's great to see you all. We've, let's see, I think it was a year and a half ago, I spoke about bonds and how to fight bonds. And that was before Families Engaged even existed. But since then, so what we've been doing, we've been traveling Texas, talking to legislators and grassroots organizations, trying to get people to understand what is happening in public education. It's in the news all the time, but sometimes what you hear in the news is it's very polarizing information, left-right paradigm, but what's really happening is what Mary and I are focusing on, getting people to understand so that we can make change, that we can fix our schools, and really help bring the focus back to learning, what the kids are learning, how they're learning, and figure out who's profiting off of that, and get the focus to be back on the teachers and the students and what it's supposed to be. All right, so next slide. So we've got this Texas Education Agency, and what I was telling Tommy earlier is that there's really no there's no constitutional justification for the federal Department of Education, but we'd also argue that we need to abolish not just the Department of Education, but also the Texas Education Agency. And that's something that people don't really think about. They focus a lot on their local ISDs and what's happening there, which there's a lot happening there. We do have a lot of issues with radical ideologies impacting what our kids are learning and how they're learning. But no one seems to talk about this education agency, and we would argue that it's failing. And Mike Morath was appointed by the governor, and so this was in 2016. All right, you can go next slide. So this is Mike Morath, and normally we don't focus on people and personalities so much as we do their policies and things. So this, and I will say this is not a personal attack on him. I'm sure he's a great guy personally, but in that position, he's failing. And this is a very important position because the bulk of our taxes go to our public schools through our property taxes to your local school districts, but it starts when it goes to the state and then comes back. So Mike Morath was appointed in 2016. He's a software entrepreneur. He does not have a background in education. And you could argue, okay, well, maybe if you look at education like a business, maybe that would be a good thing to have somebody who's not in the ecosystem or the swamp, or who's not an educrat. But the proof is in the pudding that it's not working having him in this position. And the governor is not holding him accountable. And I'll get to some important data points that back up our claims. Okay, so how do we get in this mess? Well, I mentioned the federal intrusion. Unconstitutional bills, so we've had back in LBJ, ESEA, we had No Child Left Behind with Bush, and then you have Every Student Succeeds Act under Obama. So think of it as like a system of gears that have been locked into place decade over decade, and here we are. But there are other things that are contributing to the issues in our schools. Breakdown of the families and the churches. We've seen the role kind of being abandoned. And churches say, I don't want to get involved in that. I don't want to get involved in politics. I don't want to really get involved in the school stuff. You'll see the schools as kind of a mission field for service, but you don't see them talking about what's really happening with our children in the schools. Now, there are exceptions to that, but I would say this is just kind of a broad, you can go back, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
We're still on that list.
I'm trying to read minds.
Oh, no problem. Okay, and then grants, what I call them as bribes or carrots to control. So you can make the school districts do just about anything if you dangle the money carrot. And when you think about how much money goes through the Texas Education Agency, which I'll talk about later, you realize, and things, there are organizations like the Gates Foundation, and they use the money to dangle the carrots, and they make the districts do things that we would not want them to do. Then you have the technology and ed tech vendors. This is a huge one because the kids are now all with one-to-one devices. And you think about the infrastructure, the cost of that, the bond debt that our individual districts have to float and they have to pass those bonds in order to pay for these exorbitant costs and the devices. and like I said, the infrastructure, how to manage all of that. My district in particular, which is Richardson ISD, we refreshed iPads for $10 million, and this was just a month or two ago. And these are for the little kids in the elementary schools. So technology is a huge cost, but it's also a huge failure. And the proof, like I said, is in the pudding. Then you have you heard of taxpayer-funded lobbying groups and Senate Bill 175 with Mays Middleton? So this is a big one. This would end taxpayer-funded lobbying groups where they use our tax dollars to lobby against us, to lobby for things that we don't want. This would be huge if this bill passes. Unfortunately, the bill is a little broader than just TASA and TASB, which are the school administrators and the school board lobbies. But hey, however we can get this bill passed, we need to do it. And I went and testified on it a few weeks ago on the Senate floor. I didn't even know it was up. And I ran to the kiosk and signed up, and then I went back down there and testified on this because I've been following this for a number of years. Have you heard of Dave Lieber with the Dallas Morning News, the watchdog? He's been writing for probably 2 decades on taxpayer-funded lobbying groups, the TASB, which they train the school districts to vote in lockstep. It's like a team of 8 to build consensus with no discussion, at least not in front of the public, and then the public's voice is not really represented because they're being trained by a distant voice. All right, and last is the education service centers. Mine is Region 10. I'm not sure Plano, I'm not sure what region y'all are, but there's 20 regional service centers across the state. This came through Bill a number of years ago, and this is where a lot of money and contracts are funneled through, is these education service centers, and they train the teachers. It's where a number of the issues with the indoctrination, it comes through the education service centers, and that's where the teachers are trained, and a lot of the things that we don't want are coming in through professional development. All right, next slide. Okay, so for some data here. Okay, so if you look at spending at the TEA, this is a very important one because, like I said, I don't know anybody talking about this, but this is so important that we understand that the TEA is an extension, or if it's even more than an extension of our wasteful and spend-happy ISDs. It's far worse at the TEA. So I think that we should start there and then work on the locals. And I say that because the spending is up 37% since he got there in 2016, and we pulled open records requests, and so this data comes from TEA. So look at 2016, it was 68.2 million. 2022, it's 93.7 million. Then you look at the number of hires. You hear about the ISDs having a bloated administration, and that is true. But the TEA is up 31% in their hires. And I would guess, since we pulled this in 2022, that it's gone up even more than that, probably 50 hires or more. So they are hiring like crazy. And then if you look at the enrollment, this is actually behind in, enrollment has declined since we pulled these numbers. So public school enrollment, charter school enrollment is all down. And we can draw our own conclusions about why the enrollment is down, but I think the parents know they're walking with their feet. And since the pandemic hit and the parents woke up and realized, oh wow, my child can't read, or my children weren't learning what they needed to be learning, or I don't want my children stuck on a device all day long. Once they figured that out, then they figured out other ways to educate them. Not just homeschool and not just private school, but you're seeing these learning pods and creative ways to educate kids popping up. Some of that, I would argue, is by design. I think that eventually they want all children doing kind of a hybrid model of learning, and slowly moving the children into the metaverse by putting them on devices and educating them through playlists and kind of what they call gamification of education. But that's just kind of like my hypothesis. We'll see how it goes. Okay, and then I talked about staffing, enrollment. Okay, next one. Okay, so the real purpose of this talk is to address the return on the investment. And I would argue there is no return on the investment, which goes back to why our education agency is failing, why the commissioner is failing. And we rate the schools. I don't know if that we have A through F rating that came in through a bill. He was a big proponent of this, and so we rate the campuses and we rate the districts. But then we have this legislator, Paul Bettencourt, who's supposed to be the tax man. He's a staunch conservative talking about property tax relief, but he helps pass a bill, Senate Bill 1365 in the last session, that pulls out the D and F rated campuses. So when you think about where's the accountability in that? So then they can basically cheat and fudge the numbers, and so Fort Worth will look like a B when it's not. It has 30, I don't know how many were pulled out of the D and F rating. So interesting. But so back to the return on the investment. So if you look at our, I don't know if you've heard of NAEP scores, but okay, so 40% of students are performing below basic proficiency level. 42nd in NAEP 4th grade reading, 46th in NAEP 8th grade reading, and then a 7% drop in math scores from 2015 to 2019. So when you think about this, you can't blame this on pandemic learning loss. This was actually happening before the pandemic, the continuous slide. And I've seen this in my own school district. And one thing that the commissioner has been doing over the last several years, and this came from a 2017 bill, is called math innovation zones, where they take math software vendor, and investors can put up the money up front, and it's this sort of experiment, and the investors can turn a profit if the math scores go up. And that actually came through Senator Van Taylor when he was in the legislature. I asked, would Van Taylor be okay with that for his children who go to an elite private school if investors could make a profit on his kids' math scores? No, he would never do it. You see a lot of experiments on public school children, and this has been going on decade by decade by decade. And largely, sadly, it comes from the conservatives. The Republican Party is doing a lot of these bad bills. So what we could argue, okay, well, we've got a drop in math scores. We know the reading scores are poor. More than half of the kids in Richardson ISD do not read on grade level, sadly. Okay, next one. And I mentioned the math innovation zones, and this is just a map of where they have piloted this. And these districts are incentivized to use this software, and there's different vendors. One of them is a Moscow vendor. They partnered with Moscow and Texas Oil to bring, it's called Reasoning Mind. And so they do these experiments in all these districts. Oftentimes you'll see there'll be low income, high poverty districts. Those are experimented on the most. All right, next one. And I mentioned Paul Bettencourt. So yeah, it's 139 campuses in Fort Worth, and 35 were not rated, which means the D and F were not counted. So here's my concern is that when they do put them back on there next year, whenever this ends, then are they going to look like they're failing? And we know that the commissioner is taking over Houston ISD, which after decades of all the issues in Fort Worth, you might argue that's a good thing, but all he's going to do is bring in a corporate board of managers. It's not going to change anything, because if you look at the statistics of other states who have done this, where they've taken over districts, it doesn't move the needle any, because it doesn't really address the core issues. And I'll get to what some of those core issues are, but it's really returning to an academic foundation. Time-tested reading strategies. You can't make money on old school reading strategies. So think about that. They have to trick it up and introduce some new thing, or somebody writes a book, and they're constantly changing how the teachers are supposed to teach. So then they never really master anything. And so I argue we should go back to time-tested reading strategies, math strategies, the math that put a man on the moon. All of this nonsense and this innovation is not working. And unfortunately our kids are suffering for it. And you can see, if you know about Charlotte Iserbyt and the Deliberate Dumbing Down book that she wrote, it talks about this is on purpose. She worked for the Department of Education in, I want to say it was the 60s or 70s, but she came back, or no, actually it was under Reagan, so that would have been 80s. And she was shocked to see how much had changed and how we were teaching kids. So this has been going on for decades. All right, let's go to the next one. So this was a meme that had a picture of Jeb Bush, and I just had my son Photoshop Morath's face in there, because essentially that's what they want. They want to replace our public school teachers with technology, because technology, you think about it, the human capital is what they call it. People are expensive, and the largest portion of our budget in our local districts goes to teachers and people. So you think about in their minds that it's more efficient to have technology. You can reduce the number of teachers, you can increase class sizes, and have everybody on a playlist. This is the direction, sadly, that education is heading. And when you have an entrepreneur, a software entrepreneur, as the head of one of the largest agencies in the nation, I see the writing on the wall. And I know that Abbott is, I believe he is a globalist. I know he has ties to the World Economic Forum, and I think he's just implementing the things that we're seeing across the nation and across the world. And sadly, our children are viewed as a means to bring on this metaverse and this future of work and all of this technocracy. Okay, so during the pandemic, Morath steered a no-bid contract to this Amplify company, and it's Lorena Powell Jobs is Steve Jobs' widow, and she is an investor. So they bought Amplify, and then you have Learn Capital, who's also an investor in Amplify. So this was steered during the pandemic, a $50 million contract, you know, and no one was watching. He has emergency powers, and that's when a lot of these deals came through. We've seen it we saw it with contact tracing, where Abbott did that $300 million deal for contact tracers. And you know what, with emergency powers, they never like to give them back, sadly. So Amplify, this is a big battle going on at the legislature, because it's what we call a vendor bill, and Amplify is the vendor behind this bill. Of course, they don't call it the Amplify bill, but that's what we call it, because we got wind of it. Reading the language, you can tell, oh. So what he did at the TEA, he's now wanting to deploy across Texas. He wants all districts using this new, or it's not new, but it's new to Texas, Amplify software. We had a team of parents review all of this curriculum. It's not age appropriate. There was all kinds of nasty stuff in it, porn, things that were not age appropriate, excerpts from adult content, things that undermine the family, and there's a lot of pagan examples in there and excerpts. So we alerted that, we sounded the alarms to the commissioner. He said, oh, well, we can just take those things out. But the problem with technology is it's dynamic. They can take it out next week, but they can put it back in the following week. Parents can't really see what is, there's nothing standing between the student and the devices. And so we argue we need to get rid of the technology. It's not working. It's costing us too much as taxpayers. It's pushing us out of our homes, and we need to return to the inexpensive time-tested models. Use the money saved on the technology to pay the teachers, reduce the class sizes, and return to a classical, traditional model. Okay, next one. So I mentioned that no bid contract, but there's others going through the TEA, and I mean, you can read this, 128.4 million. He circumvents the elected state board. He's sharing, harvesting, and selling student data to third parties. And then we also have an issue where they're embedding character traits into the TEKS, which are the standards. All of this is coming in through Governor Abbott being over our state and then over the education agency with no one watching it and no one holding them accountable. I mentioned the math innovation zones. We also have districts of innovation, which allow for the districts to circumvent the law, because it creates this zone, or this innovation zone, where they can be exempted from some of the laws that have come through the legislature. And that came in through House Bill 1842. It's the same bill that's allowing them to take over Houston. When you think about that, that removes the democratically elected school board. As corrupt as our school boards are, you don't want a corrupt board of appointed managers. You want to at least have the option to be able to vote these people out. You can't do that with a corporate board. All right, so next one. Okay, I added this because there's a lot of talk about the, they call it parent empowerment, which is the school choice bills, and there's a number of bills that are going through the legislature. And I understand why people want to take the money and let it follow the child. No argument there. The unfortunate reality is every single one of those bills have strings. I've read them all. They will say they don't, but they do, and they create more bureaucracy. And I even testified at the legislature last week. I'm like, if you were to create a school choice bill that I could even get behind, it would be one with no strings. Just give people the money. Just quit taking our money in the first place. Have it never leave your property taxes. But that's kind of fantasy land. So, so if you look at the fiscal note on these bills, that's an interesting piece. So the bills all sound good, and they have a lot of slick marketing around them. But if you read the fiscal note, so looking at it, so you've got so this is the Senate Bill 8, which is probably that's one of the, I guess, the most favored bills. They really want Senate Bill 8 to go through. The governor does, and that's these are school choice bills. And looking at the year-over-year fiscal impact, and then the total number of students that are in Texas in public schools. Look at the cost per student, $41,790. Well, it's about maybe $10,000 to $12,000 in the school district. So this is going to cost a fortune. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. We believe that if this bill passes, we'll have think of it as 4 taxpayer-funded toll lanes in public education. You've got public schools, you have charter schools, you have virtual schools, which that's another bill, and then you have the voucher bill. We will be paying for that. I think the mindset is, I think when people are thinking about these school choice bills, is that would take the money out of the public school, let it follow the child, so net, you wouldn't have a change there. I mean, it's being spent either here or spent there, but it's actually there. It will be where you're spending more, which doesn't make any sense to us. So I don't know. We're watching this. If there weren't strings, we could support it, because I know that not every child can get what they need in the public schools. In fact, I'm arguing for people. First draw a circle around yourself, protect your own child first, and if you don't feel like the schools are safe, pull them out. Absolutely pull them out, because you can starve them of the funding, and you can, because they get butts in the seat funding, they call weighted average daily attendance. That's one way to attack the problem. As the schools are seeing these, the parents taking their children out, it is causing them to ask, oh, what are we gonna do? $77 million is what Richardson ISD has in a budget shortfall. Well, I've been sounding the alarm for a decade now. Wake up, Richardson. You need to be educating the kids. Return to the basics. And I'm hoping that as they hear this message, that they will start exploring that. I know that's probably a little more optimistic than I should be, but I am. I mean, it's important that our children, okay, so we can pull our children out, but the ones left behind, if you think about that's 5.4 million children in Texas. Do we care about what happens to them? Absolutely. Are we paying for it? Yes, we are. And we're being robbed. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. Okay, next slide. So the bills I was talking about, or that I'm excited about in the legislature that are about removing the technology in the schools are these. It's Senate Bill 2141, which will be heard in the Senate on Wednesday, and then House Bill 5104. So this is unprecedented. We've never had bills like this. And you've got Tan Parker carrying the Senate bill and Representative Steve Toth carrying the House bill. And these bills have support not just from grassroots, but also the teacher organizations, and I'll tell you why. About, I don't know, maybe a month ago, I was asked to speak at an AFT rally, which is the American Federation of Teachers. I'm thinking, what do they want with me? Don't they, because they're known to be left-leaning. I go and speak on data mining, data harvesting, and the overabundance and the overuse of technology in the schools. So the teachers unions are figuring out.
I wanted to take a picture.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll send you screenshots of them. Okay. So they wanted me to come speak, and this is a huge rally in Austin on data mining, data harvesting, and the technology. They're starting to figure out And what I'm saying is, the teachers are being replaced by this technology. That's by design. So if you're part of the unions, wouldn't you want, as self-preservation, wouldn't you want to know this so that you can fight it? So they're actually supporting, a lot of the teachers' organizations are supporting these bills because they're starting to wake up and realize, okay, this is a serious issue. And they do see, they know, they see what happens to the kids in the classroom. They're addicted to screens, the isolation, the addiction to social media, doing everything on technology. It's affecting their ability to communicate. And we're seeing all kinds of health issues from just sitting and staring at screens and not being active. And so there's a number of reasons why these are very important bills that we believe that both the left and the right can get behind because of how much of a crisis we're in with our children. And there's a lot of talk about mental health, but their solutions aren't really addressing the root of the problem. This addresses the root of the problem, or one of the major problems. Okay, let's see, next one. So I try and make things simple, and so because education is complicated, there are so many acronyms, and there's a lot of educanese and eduspeak and language that just is not the same kind of language that we use, but it's made its way through the school districts. And people have a difficult, they kind of glaze over when you talk about education because it's become so complicated. So I thought, I need to put this in simple terms. What do we need to do to return the money to the taxpayers and return the money to the schools so that it goes to the teachers and the students and not all of these special interests? One, which I've mentioned before, Senate Bill 175 would eliminate TASA and TASB, which are the the Texas Association of School Boards and Texas Association of School Administrators, where they train our superintendents and our school boards to not listen to us. And then you have Educate Texas, which I had mentioned, Gates Foundation. He funnels money through the Educate Texas, but the TEA also pays Educate Texas. I really think we need an audit of the TEA. I think that would solve a multitude of problems if we just had a full audit of the Texas Education Agency to understand what contracts are going through there, why how these no-bid deals are happening, why they're using all these consultants and these vendors and these ed tech firms, and eliminate them, and then return that money back to the taxpayers. Todd Williams and Commit, that's a nonprofit where he is, he's one of the most powerful men in public education. So a lot of the bills that are written behind the scenes, they're written by Commit and Todd Williams. He's a former Goldman Sachs guy. And then you have the education service centers, which I'd mentioned. There's 20 across the state. We need to just eliminate those. That would return a ton of money back to the taxpayers. And then education technology, which of course we have all the proof that it's failing, not working. And then we need to fire Morath. He needs to go. He needs to go back to the software world and leave children alone. So that's pretty much it. The other thing is, I did not talk about this because this is it could be a whole presentation in and of itself, but it's social emotional learning. And you hear a lot about how these political ideologies and things are coming in. You hear a lot about CRT, but we found that it's social emotional learning that's the biggest threat. And it comes in through surveys and invasive questionnaires and things, tapping into their emotions, non-cognitive skills, abandoning academic, the whole purpose of education, abandoning academics for the behavioral and non-cognitive. So we would argue that parents should reject all surveys, make Swiss cheese out of the data that they're collecting on children, and ask a bunch of questions, and then always follow the money and ask about the contracts and what vendors they're using for social emotional learning. We have a stack of 500 surveys that we thought we'd get like maybe, 30 from Fort Worth, 500 surveys. They are being bombarded with surveys and questionnaires, climate surveys. How do you feel? What did you eat for breakfast? Do your parents have a gun? That kind of thing. It's crazy. So, all right, let's see. I think that's it. And any questions that you have about what's going on in the schools?
Are surveys legal everywhere, or is it by school district?
So what happened is, under Obama, he gutted FERPA, which is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, and so you'll find a lot of these things come in, whether they're legal or not, there's no teeth in the law. And so the school districts are pressured under the accountability rating to make sure the climate is good, that the kids feel good, the teachers feel good, and so they're constantly doing these things. Some of them are sinister, some of them they don't even know that they're bad. But we need to stop doing that, because you see how much time they're spending. Like with my kids, during the, it's like what they call homeroom, but it's his advisory period is when they were doing a lot of this. So some kids are getting 30 minutes to an hour of this junk a day, and then we wonder why they can't read on grade level. It's because they've supplanted education with so many other things and tapping into emotions. And it does activate, or it does create little activists if they're focused on that all the time. And my son would say, gosh, I would just like to write about a person, place, or thing. I'm so sick of talking about my feelings. I don't want to share that with people I don't know here. He wants to learn about history and whatever else is going on in the world. He doesn't want to talk about how he feels or what he did this week. You know, it's an overemphasis on drawing from your own experience rather than learning about the world.
The education bill said they had too many strings on it. What would you recommend us to do or to tell our legislators that we want?
Well, regarding are you talking about if it's money following the child? Yeah. Well, I would say.
Is the Arizona bill?
Yeah. Okay, so I read about the issues with that, and I know that they're having to tweak quite a few things to that because of because they're really at the core, they're banking schemes. So they run through the comptroller. With education savings accounts, it creates a new vendor can collect up to 10%. It's probably, with ours, it's probably 3 or 4%, not quite that much, but that can change over time. So when you think about the money and the campaign behind it, if you look at who's funding it, a lot of it goes back, it ties to, the Bushes and Florida. And so, it's unfortunate that our Republican legislators don't know this stuff, or if they do, they're ignoring it. They just want to be the one to get that one through, that first bill through. There's one that talks about special needs kids, so they use the most vulnerable as a way to get the bill passed. But they have to forego their IDEA rights, and we know that the schools discriminate against. I mean, it's hard enough to get the public schools to serve special needs kids. You really think there's just an overabundance of private schools who will take them? So they may have the money to hand to that next school, but if they can't get in, then it doesn't solve the problem. So we're trying to get the school districts, and I didn't mention this earlier, but what we do at Families Engaged is we train parents how to file a grievance. We train parents on how to not be manipulated by their school districts. So we're actually going back to the law. We're focusing on the law to fight the lawlessness and to train parents to use the things on the books that can help us fight what they're doing and how to advocate for our children. And if we get critical mass of people seeing that it actually works, we've had major fruit in success in Fort Worth, shockingly. We've had a number of bad administrators and school board trustees step down. They don't like to be exposed. They do not like the grievance process. And we go straight to the third level, and that third level gives you a public forum. You're standing at the podium before the board, you get 10 minutes and they can't interrupt. So you can plead your case and the grievance that you have filed. So we ask to just go straight to the third level because it's recorded, you can do it on camera, and it's powerful. And then that causes momentum. And they scatter like cockroaches. So it just takes time, but since the way that we just haven't been trained on how to use the law to do that. But that's how, the only way is to the ground to push back up rather than all of this top down. That's the only way to save our nation. And we do believe that education is a huge way to do that. And of course, they're after our children.
mentioned a couple of times that we need to fire Morath, but who fires Morath?
The governor. So yeah, it's the governor.
So there's no, so Congress can't submit a vote of no confidence or?
No.
Okay.
We had an opportunity at a Senate confirmation hearing. We did have parents and special need teachers and all kinds of people show up to say do not appoint him back in 2017 or so. And Birdwell and all the senators who were on there ignored it. Huffines actually gave the introduction on why he's so wonderful. So yeah, he really snowed all of our conservative legislators. And really he snowed the left. Like when he's with the left, he'll talk about words like equity and, you know, all those buzzwords, but when he's with the right, he can pose as an evangelical, you know, right wing. So they both think he's one of them. And that's given him a tremendous amount of power to get legislation through. And ultimately he has they're building a dossier on all students in Texas. Because he is so data driven and computers and technology is the major focus of his, that he has a tremendous amount of power, and I've never seen anything like it. But because of parents pushing back and sounding the alarms, you're hearing people a little bit more aware of who he is and what a chameleon he is, and so the media is starting to finally question him as well. But it's I don't know what to do. I'm just,
I'm trying to take up all the questions. So you mentioned some of the House bills that fall short, and I think you attempted to answer in Tony's question. I just wanna make sure there's not a bill that's up there or anybody sponsoring that we should be pushing.
Okay, so I met with a gentleman years ago and through Jill Glover connected me to him, and he talked about a property tax relief for education. So you would just get a credit, property tax credit. And there is one that kind of looks like that, but they're still, and let me think, I want to say, is it Shaheen or Schaefer? I can't remember which one it is. But still even reading that one, they all have strings, and they give either commissioner authority or they give the governor authority to put forth a committee, or you have to show receipts, or you have to be enrolled in the public schools before you can unenroll. I mean, it's just like, why are there so many strings? It makes no sense, because they're mostly driven by conservative legislators, and they will even tell us that there's no strings, and there are. So I can't support any of them, but I know that the feedback given from the Republican Party was take out parent empowerment at the top, because our rights come from God. If you put that in, they'll say this gives parents gives parents the authority and power and all this. No, we get that from God, and so these are inalienable rights. That you put that in a bill as though you're giving them to us, then can you take them away? They realize, oh, you're right. That we don't need to put that in there. So one of them took it out, but yeah, there's a big competition. I know, DeSantis has been able to do this. Abbott, I think it's sort of it's almost like an initiation ritual. Whoever's going to be the next president will have to have shown that he or she has passed the school choice, but I've yet to see any of them talk about eliminating the federal, the Department of Education and just returning that money to the states and end that intrusion and that encroachment and all the hoops you have to jump through, Title I and all the funding that comes from the federal government, which is our money. So I think that's more the solution than some of these kind of Band-Aids. But not to convince you, I mean, you can read the bills and you can see they're so long that I'd say it should just say, hey, give each person, this amount and be done with it, and however you want to use it, right? Okay,
So, what are our call to actions? I mean.
Yeah. Okay, well, so I would say on the Senate bill, I think this is the most important one. Senate Bill 2141, write your senators and say you support this no tech, low tech, less tech bill. And everyone can come up with your own reason why, what you see in your grandchildren. you see, I mean, there's a number, there's something different for everyone. People who are in the classroom would say, oh, well, they can't focus on anything. So there's different reasons, but speak from the heart. And then, we'll have a hearing on House Bill 5104, which is the other no-tech bill, which is Toth's bill. And thank them for doing these bills, because it takes a lot of courage to do this, because the world is telling us we need to be more innovative, and that the future is technology. But as we know, I mean, I like all of the bells and whistles. I love technology. I'd be a hypocrite to say that I didn't. My kids like technology. But when we're talking about children and how they should learn, and what they're being denied, and that we're funding it, I think it should be eliminated in K through 5. And I've been really encouraged going door to door at the Capitol. These young 20-something staffers, that's all you really get to talk to. They get it. They say, oh yeah, my niece and nephews, they're addicted to screens. Because if you think about that, I have my kids are 22, 21, and 19. They didn't have all this stuff. While they did have iPhones, and that started to come, but those from 0 to 10, you know, I limited all of that, and there wasn't the kind of technology that the little ones are on now. And it's certainly, my kids did not have one-to-one devices in school until they were in high school. So we bypassed a lot of this innovation, and they benefited from learning the old school way. So those staffers in the Capitol, they know what I'm talking about. And so it's an easy bill to discuss with them. The other ones, they glaze over, and they're sick of hearing people coming and pitching, what they want. But that one I found to be the easiest, and we have that handout just to say, we hope you'll support this bill. Other action items, you can put pressure on the governor and the lieutenant governor on why the commissioner needs to go. And then, and even telling your local representatives, because they know who he is. He's pretty famous there at the Capitol. And when we talk to groups, we tell them, we give them data-driven details on why he needs to go. If he was head of a corporation, he'd be fired because of his performance. So why would we let him continue to be there? And if there's enough people saying that, then maybe, just maybe, he'll go. That doesn't mean they won't bring somebody, another educrat or somebody in there, technocrat. But at least it gives us a clean slate to start and to continue to try and clean up the TVA. And like I mentioned, we need an audit. And then, personally with your own children, make Swiss cheese out of the data and refuse the technology, refuse the surveys, refuse, all the things that are harmful, and request that they return to the traditional time-tested way to teach children. I did pull my youngest out of public schools for 2 years to have him remediated when he was in 4th and 5th grade, and he went to a school called Highlander, and it's no tech, and they have a 50-year-old curriculum. It doesn't change every 2 years, when the teachers have to learn a new way to teach this or that, and it works. And that gives the teachers confidence, gives the kids confidence, and I think that it's not too much to ask for us to do that. And you could recruit some of those retired older educators, the ones who know how to do it, pay them. They would come back if they were paid, and they were able to have the autonomy that they once had. That's why a lot of them fled the profession. And I believe that's by design. I think the profession is under attack. I think our schools are under attack because they want access to that next generation, not just their political, but also their social emotional, and the whole child. Here to talk about the whole child, which is an agenda. They want the whole child, body, mind, soul. Any other questions?
What was the number of Toth's bill?
Toth's bill is House Bill 5104.
So if we were gonna, does it help any for us to reach out to someone and say TEA needs to be audited?
Yes, absolutely. If we're all
Who would that
saying
be?
that, I guarantee you it would eventually happen, yes.
And who
does
do
that?
we,
Well, if there's a scandal, there is a 2018 audit of a no-bid deal that was a data mining scandal. so that was through the state auditor, and that was triggered because a whistleblower exposed that Morath had sold private sensitive data to a startup out of Atlanta, a data mining company for. So there are things that can trigger an audit, but a full agency audit, the governor could make that happen. The legislators could make that happen if enough people were saying it. So I don't know the answer, how to get it, I just keep saying it, yes.
So you're saying that it was disclosed that Morath did something illegal?
Yeah, it was an illegal.
What was the consequence?
If you look up, well, nothing, they had to pay back, the no bid company had to pay back, they'd already been paid half of it, it was a $4.4 million deal, and the company was called SPEDX, S-P-E-D-X. So Morath steered the contract to them, they found, the special ed director blew the whistle on it. She had a federal suit, she won, but because of the sovereign immunity of the TEA, I mean, it's such a wicked game, but they didn't have to make good on it, they didn't have to pay her. But she was a legitimate special ed director, she was fantastic, and she was actually working with parents, trying to get special needs services for kids, and she knew Morath was bad news, and she was documenting all this stuff, and then she found the no bid deal, and it was illegal, because he didn't go through proper procurement, and it was a bunch of cronies. Yeah, I mean, the whole agency is corrupt, it's just not enough people know about this, and so that's why I'm just, person to person, heart to heart, just telling people what's really going on. So very few people who really understand who we're dealing with there.
And if
It's
it doesn't
bad.
make the nightly news, nobody
Does
knows
not.
about it.
Does not.
So it's.
No. And he came
same
from
as
Dallas. He was on a
DC.
DISD school board, on the DISD school board, so he failed upward and the media protects him here. That's the other thing I've found. Dallas is like deep state of education. All the bad stuff starts where I live.
Need to do the same thing.
Yeah,
with the
I was
Dallas County
educational,
schools.
so.
So yeah.
I taught in Denton, it was,
In Denton.
yeah, I did 10 and a half years there.
Ooh, yeah.
Anytime I hear
Sounds like
these
a
talks, I'm
prison.
like,
You're
yep,
like
yep,
PTSD,
yep,
I'm
yep,
sorry.
yep.
Gonna say, they need to do the same thing to them that they did to Dallas County schools.
Well, yes, that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because Huffines did that, and so I met with him and I said, hey, how can we use that same model? That was brilliant, because he used the media, he had a bill, and there was a scandal, so it's like the perfect,
Trifecta.
yes, and the court of public opinion, and they dissolved the Dallas County School Bus Company. My only criticism was that there was no contingency plan. So, we're talking about taking down TASB, and through this bill that Mace Middleton has, and through the court of public opinion, if everybody knows it's bad, and if we could find a scandal, which I'm sure there are scandals, then yes, I think that we could do the same, but we have districts who are pulling out of TASB, like Grapevine, I think it's Grapevine
They're the first one, yeah,
and
Grapevine.
Carroll ISD, and there's like 4 of them, and that's just going to start getting the ball rolling, and then when new trustees get on, they push to remove themselves.
I sent an email to the Allen ISD, the group of 8, and I
Good,
said, you can't lead the way, but you can follow their lead.
yeah,
And I just sent
absolutely.
them the link to the story.
Yes, and then come up, now what I wanna do is I met with some people who are trying to come up with an alternative to TASB so that, and you don't really need an alternative, for much, other than insurance and a few hours of training. The TASB policies are already in place that are cut and paste, so the districts could create their own policies and detach from TASB. I think that would be a massive win for Texas if we could do that.
And competition for insurance and other things would
Yeah, free
create.
market.
We want you, and it'll be a competition, and whoever gives you the best price is gonna get your.
Exactly, it's not that complicated. Yeah, no, I'm excited about that.
Would it create more chaos?
No, because, the districts, it would force the school board trustees to actually make their own decisions rather than doing the check the box, cut and paste. It's the team of 8 training. It actually, it results in groupthink so that they don't think for themselves. That's how we got in this mess, or one reason we got in this mess, is because the districts, you elect somebody, you think this person's going to represent you, and then they go off to TASB to be trained, and they come back, and it's like their brains have been taken out of their
Right.
heads, and they don't care, they don't listen to you anymore, cause Tasby told me this. Or I'm doing this, I wanna build consensus with the other trustees, I don't need to listen to you, I've seen it over and over again. It happens at the legislature too,
Oh,
you like
yeah.
someone, you're like, where did they go, where are you, so.
Do they do anything good?
The what?
Tasby or TASA, do they do anything?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that there are, I've had trustees tell me, you know, this course helped me understand Texas Open Meetings Act, and what I can and can't do or say in order to not get in trouble for violating anything, sure. But you can also read that, I mean, you can read these things on your own. Yeah, it's not rocket science.
When you're elected here, we
Uh-huh, yeah, it's taking responsibility rather than looking to a distant voice to tell you, you know, how to think and what to do. It's an overwhelming job, I think, at first, and so it's easy for them just to say, ooh, if I just join the pack, there's safety in numbers, and then I can say, well, that, you know, that's, you know, what the consensus was. But I would never do that, and that's why I can't get elected, cause they know I'll say no to everything. No. I ran for school board in 2017 in Richardson, and I got 46%. I did come close, but our elections, as you know, they're not secure. So I don't know what the real percentage was. I didn't know that there was voter fraud, other than in other parts of Dallas County. I didn't clue in that it could be in my, you know, Richardson. But anyway, okay. Any more questions? Y'all are a good, engaged group.
It'll be interesting to see, cause you talked about the unions opening their eyes to technologies and how that's a slippery slope on both, oh, good, they're opening their eyes, but then also what will they be pushing, right? Who's gonna be blamed for this move to promote their
Yeah.
agenda? And then, you know, you always hear, well, technology, at least this is with my organization, when you implement technology, it creates more jobs because you have the people that support the technology, which in some cases is true, cause
Yeah.
crap they put into my company, I have to have 4 people to help manage, but is it working this? So it'll just be an interesting dynamic to see,
Yeah.
is that really somebody we want to help support not implementing the technology, that's all.
Well, I think what it is that the thought is, there are some people who think, okay, well, if we put them in front of a device, that's more controlled, and it's not a radical teacher with purple hair.
That's what I worry about, yeah.
Exactly. But what I've learned is if you've got Lorena Powell-Jobs, who's a, you know, raging, you know, Democrat, and she's funding and doing, she's over Amplify, or her Emerson Collective is over Amplify Learning, and we also have proof that the kids have bad content in Amplify, then I would argue, I'd rather have a human teacher.
Sure.
And I think we could drive up the professionalism if you could pay more and be more selective about who is teaching, and bring, you know, incentivize teachers to wanna come back, because if you're teaching 10 kids as opposed to 28, huge difference.
Right.
Huge difference. So, I mean, these are, you know, some of these things are, I mean, I am a dreamer. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't have hope and optimism. But it is a major uphill battle. I mean, to transform Texas and then transform the nation, you know, back to where we should be. That's a major feat. But you all wouldn't do what you do if you didn't have hope, right? I know True Texas Project does
giant
a lot.
redwoods start from little seeds.
That's right, that's right. Well, thank you, appreciate
Thank you.
y'all, and the good dialogue, all you do.
I do have one more question.
Uh-huh.
So you mentioned something about that you do training.
Yes.
Families engaged does training, so what,
How do you
Yeah.
do that? Okay, you can go to, info@familiesengaged.org, if you wanna email us, and, we train on the grievance process, and then we train on, well, we can train you how to do public information requests, so that's one place to start. Because you know, the more you know, the more you can uncover and expose and get to the bottom. And then, it's what we call the Delphi, where your district will try to Delphi you, which is manipulate you, and they create these stakeholder group meetings, and they'll say, put on a sticky note what you wanna see for this strategic plan or for whatever the issue is in the district. And so you feel like you've given your input, but they have a preordained outcome already decided before the meeting began. It makes you feel like you got to talk, but they're not really gonna do anything. That's how to recognize how not to be Delphied. So we do a number of training things. So yeah, or I can give you my card and contact me. We need about 5 people in each district. We don't need a huge army. We need a handful of people in each district, and we can share information. And they all kind of follow a similar blueprint, so it's not that difficult to, you can see they do the same thing in every district pretty much.
So do you have to have, to do these things, you have to have kids in the
No,
district?
not at all, no. Taxpayer doesn't matter. Yeah, and you could do another district you're not even living in. I mean, we need all hands on deck.
So there's a, we need to get back to, we'd like to get back to read the basics, reading, writing, and then they say, oh, you're just,
Right.
you're not with the times or whatever. So what's a good comeback on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the
Because I'm one of those that say
technology,
that-
my 100-year-old grandmother can use the technology. So it's like this idea that they need to be exposed to it, they already are. We're saying the way that they learn and the way that they should learn, and the way that we learn is being denied to them. And so, if you look at how they're learning now and what they're doing now, there's all the proof that it's not working, so your arguments, you win. And that's the thing with these bills. We win. It doesn't matter who we're talking to, they go, okay, you're right. I'm like, okay, then support the bill. We have the proof in the pudding. Texas is in the bottom quartile. How much further do we need to go before we say, hey, maybe we should take the technology out of the schools and try something new? How radical, but let's try it.
Try something old.
Our youngest granddaughter is educated in the Norman, Oklahoma school system. The school system was hacked, and they were told they had to pay X amount of money to get their technology open. The
Ransom, this is happening, yeah.
They don't have school books. Our daughter is in 10th grade. They don't have books.
Yeah.
They don't have electronic devices. The teachers don't have books. The teachers didn't know how to teach. Our daughter-in-law was a teacher. They coughed her up and they're calling all the other teachers, can you
Help.
come in and help us out? We don't know what they can do.
That's sad. But, yeah, we're
And
gonna
that
see
went on
more
for
and more
about
of
a month.
that. And porn and all the other things. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Have you ever heard of, the Building Education Students Together group? It's actually part of FreedomWorks.
Is that, Duke Pesta? No, that's Freedom. Yeah,
The acronym is BEST.
Oh,
Building
but, yeah,
Education for
I
Students
did
Together.
a, school board training panel with them one time.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a Texas group, there's a national group, and they have Zoom meetings, which I haven't seen in a while.
I haven't seen
And
anything.
there's another group called, Building Parents Defending Education.
Yes, I have heard of that one. Yeah.
Be
Yeah,
able to help
I mean, the
you.
more people who are saying the same message, the better. That's,
And they were able to help me.
yeah.
And KJTN also.
What is it?
It's Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, which is a
Ah.
pro-Israel group, but the founder is, I had gotten email a few years ago about the anti-Semitic content in school books in her local county, which is Williamson County, Tennessee. So she's gotten involved in education also.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna give me, I can write down a couple of those and check them out. Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So anyway, just as a reminder, we are looking for volunteers. We also want to fill up this place because this is a very nice venue. I think the backdrop and everything and just the echo, so.
Speaker
so-
in a new place.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
Please help us
Fancy
promote the new
that.
venue. We'd love to have you back. Bring a friend. I would would love to have some of the people I invite show up, but all we gotta do is keep asking, so.
Yeah.
But again, thank you for our speaker, really do appreciate it, and y'all have a wonderful evening, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you guys do.
Got a sign?
And have fun at the event
Oh,
that
you're-
I wish I could go
Oh.
to.
Thank you. I probably would
I
have
leave
noticed
stuff all
it.
over the
Hey,
place.
was I on, did I ever, I don't think I ever turned it on, did I? Haha. I know to project.
Do you have a card?
I do, yes.
You do?
You know, I never turned the speaker on, isn't that funny?
They all heard you, unless your video didn't hear you.
Oh, that's fine, it's
In
just
our
for
new
Mary.
place that everybody found easily, we had such a crowd.
We,
I'm
well,
sorry.
it,
This
don't
must be so-
apologize,
I
it
think
is,
that it must be so disheartening.
it's not, because it's not a numbers game, I know that sounds, it's really not, sometimes you can connect more when there's less people, and then that grows. We're still getting, trust me, I have a big voice and a big mouth, and I'm using it in so many different ways. Social media is a big one, but at the legislature, we have different ways, we're reaching people in very creative ways. So, you know, all these groups are, it doesn't matter if there's 6 people or 600.
Eventually, people could say that they're coming to a meeting where they film XYZ.